You talking to me?
You can ask yourself a question.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Everybody in the house! Is that why you are here?
Hello and welcome to the UK Film Review Podcast. I'm your host Andy Furlong. Coming up on the show this week, I will be having a look at Eye in the Sky and Jon Favreau's The Jungle Book. Also, be sure to head on over to ukfilmreview.co.uk this week, where you will find reviews of The Pearl Button, Couple in a Hole, Midnight Special and so much more. It's a great place for film fans, but of course so is this podcast, and coming up next is Eye in the Sky.
This is Colonel Powell. She's going to walk you through the capture of Aisha Al-Hadi, aka Susan Danford.
We have intelligence of a meeting between Danford and numbers 4 and 5 on our most wanted list.
We believe that they're connected to the recent suicide bombing in Kenya.
We have information that they will be in this house today. This is an operation to capture, not kill.
Range 22,000 feet.
You have your orders, Lieutenant. Your job is to be their eye in the sky.
Yes, ma'am.
I have to know if Danford is inside and who is with her.
So, Eye in the Sky, directed by Gavin Hood, who people might know as the director of X-Men Origins, Wolverine, and Ender's Game, both of which I haven't seen actually. But anyway, it also stars Helen Mirren, Aaron Paul, Alan Rickman, and the guy who is no longer the captain, but a really promising actor, Barked Abdi. So, from the beginning, a cast that will be of interest to a lot of different people for different reasons, and one you can get behind. Helen Mirren plays Colonel Powell, a military officer in charge of an operation to capture terrorists in Kenya. Now, we learned from the beginning that this is pretty much a drone operation and mostly consists of a team spread out over different countries, sitting behind monitors that will be handling the operation. And we know this because early on, you know that song from the cartoon Animaniacs, The Nations of the World, where Yakko sings and points to the different countries, you know, the United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, Haiti, Jamaica and Peru. Well, in this we get Surrey, Nairobi, Nevada, Singapore and some terrorists too in the beginning of the movie, when they're trying to introduce us to the different characters involved in the different locations across the world. We even got like 3 locations in the same country to follow in some cases, which kind of makes it hard to figure out who's doing what in the early stages. But you know, eventually you do get your bearings and know where you are. Alan Rickman is in a room with politicians debating the ethics of what's unfolding in London. Aaron Paul is in charge of the drone mission, and Barked Abdi is on the ground in Kenya itself. Now here's the thing, I know I said before, when it comes to films, you shouldn't insert your own politics into the film, like being outraged that Michael Bay isn't politically correct, or worry about how all the female characters are being portrayed in Mad Max, because that's not what those films are concerned with or dealing with. I think to be a good critic, you almost have to be like, you know, Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer. Well, to be a good critic, you almost have to be like the movie whisperer. You have to look into what the movie is saying and form your own opinion based on that, rather than inserting and stamping your own beliefs into the equation when it's not needed. To an extent, you have to try and do that anyway. I think ultimately we all fail at it because we are always looking at things through our own spectrum. But you know, incidentally, I am pretty good at movie whispering, because when I talked to Batman vs Superman, it told me it was a piece of shit. It also told me I had a second cousin named Martha, to which I replied, that shouldn't change how you feel about someone. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, when something comes along like Eye in the Sky and tries to pass itself off as a political commentary, and the central question of the movie is about the pros and the cons of drone warfare, then my friends, you're allowed to interject your opinions right into the centre of the argument, because that's what the film is asking you to do. And I have to say, I found the politics depicted in this film to be insincere and a joke, quite honestly. They'll have us believe that there's a bunch of politicians debating in a room whether they should launch a drone while watching the events unfold live. They will have us believe that they have to get hold of the Prime Minister to make a decision about it at one point. They will have us believe that 2 teary-eyed soldiers would even get to be in charge of firing drone missiles and have so much conflicting emotions during the operation that they might go against the mission. They will have us believe that the people involved might blow the entire operation to launch the drone on terrorists because there is one civilian in close proximity to the attack, when we know for a fact in real life that over the last 10 years that 1,000 civilians die per every 41 terrorists that are killed during drone strikes. Give me a break. Now, none of that would even be a problem for me if the film was entertaining. Honestly, I wouldn't care at all about any of that. I wouldn't. I've liked films in the past that's had flag waving and politics I haven't agreed with. If it's a good film or entertaining, I don't care one bit, quite honestly. But if a film tries to pass itself off as a serious political commentary on something and tries to come across as morally complex to the point that it's 75% talking and debating about the events for the entire movie, don't try and do it with a rhetoric that's as ill-conceived and misleading as this is. They're acting in this film as if a drone attack was never launched in the history of mankind before. But what do I know? I was rooting for the Somalian pirates and Captain Phillips. Don't trust my opinion. Go and see it for yourself. I think Aaron Paul does his best with what he's given, and Baghdad Abdi and his character is by far the best thing about the movie, and his scenes are the only thing that even comes near anything that could be considered tension. But other than that, I'd avoid this movie. It's not a recommendation at all. So that was Eye in the Sky, but coming up next is my review of The Jungle Book.
Are you alone out here? What are you doing so deep in the jungle? Don't you know what you are? I know what you are. I know where you came from.
So, The Jungle Book, Disney classic, one of their best films, gets an adaptation by Jon Favreau. The live action adaptations of Disney movies have not been good so far. Alice in Wonderland, Maleficent, Cinderella is a little bit better, but still, they haven't been good or captured anything remotely Disney-esque, really. Now, I think it's also important to separate one adaptation from the other as well. You know, you hear all the time with people moaning about, I can't believe they changed this and that. I can't believe Michael Bay is going to change the turtles into aliens in his adaptation. Listen, it was a can of ooze that changed them into mutant turtles in the original. Like that's any better. The point I'm trying to make is people become married to their particular version that first impacted them and seem to reject any change to a franchise as blasphemy. Let's not forget The Jungle Book is an adaptation itself of a Kipling book. So my point is, listen, have Batman brand people or kill people for all I care. Just do it in a good way is all I ask. Now, in the case of The Jungle Book, I tried to do the same thing coming into it. I was obviously seeing it because of my affection and love for the original, but I had to leave room for Jon Favreau to do what he wanted and not just reject it because it wasn't my Jungle Book. Now, here's the thing. In a way, this is my Jungle Book. It's the closest they could get to the originals as they can while exploring new avenues. This feels like a live version of the original Jungle Book, and in some ways it's better than the original. In some ways it's not. One of the charms of the original was that it was basically Mowgli wandering around the jungle, meeting some wonderfully colourful and memorable characters. This has that too, of course, but it also feels a lot more epic. Now, it never feels like a blockbuster version of The Jungle Book, which is a good thing, but it's scary when it needs to be, it's violent when it needs to be. Almost all the new things they introduce in this movie work. Shout out to Gary Shandling as a porcupine, folks. It's some of the familiar things associated with the original that don't work so well. However, this movie isn't a musical, but we do get some nice musical instrumental versions of some of the classics as part of the score, which is awesome. When the movie was announced, I was so excited that Christopher Walken was King Louie, the man cub, Mowgli. But King Louie does not work in this movie at all. I didn't like that whole sequence at all. Kaa's fine, but not really memorable at all. They changed one thing that was essential, in my opinion, to the drive of the original narrative as well, which I cannot understand why they did that, because it would have translated to this live action version so much better and helped with the pacing and the stakes of the movie a bit. Then there was things that I initially found jarring, as it didn't seem right based on the Jungle Book I knew. Like Ben Kingsley is pitch perfect as Bagheera, but it took me a while to get used to Bill Murray as Baloo and Idris Elba as Shere Khan, but that's because to me Phil Harris is Baloo and George Sanders is Shere Khan, so it's not a problem. And after a little while I started to enjoy the new voice work. Idris Elba in particular nails it as the quietly menacing and extremely powerful Shere Khan. That's another thing about this version. I thought the CGI was excellent. All the animals are CGI, but they felt real, like they had real weight to them, and I just think they really nailed that side of things as best as they could. It took 5 hours per frame for Baloo alone. It's quite staggering stuff. But all the animals look really good, which is important. The kid who plays Mowgli is your standard bad child actor, but he isn't the kind of child actor that will ruin a movie and make you cringe with every line reading, so that's something. And Favreau gets the best out of him. He doesn't have to act very much. When he does, at least it comes across as a kid, kind of naturally as a kid, not some overcoached mini Marlon Brando that's mimicking what the acting coach told him to do without any concept of what the context of the scene actually is. It's charming, it's nostalgic, it gives fans of the Disney classic most of what they could possibly want from a live adaptation. I found it really enjoyable and you should watch it in the cinema. It's a definite recommendation from me. So that was The Jungle Book. Now, as always, before I end the show, I have some film recommendations for you guys to check out. My first recommendation is The Dark Knight Returns, the animated version of the Frank Miller comic. You need to watch part 1 and 2 of this, actually. Nolan has taken elements from this comic. Snyder has too, except he hasn't absolutely butchered what he took. If you guys want to check out a proper Batman vs Superman fight, you need to check out this. It's probably the second best adaptation you will see on screen of Batman after Nolan's. You could even argue it's better. Check it out for yourself and get back to me on that one. My next recommendation this week is Frozen. The premise is simple. 3 skiers are trapped on a lift and forced to make life or death decisions. If you like movies set in one location, there's few more tense than this. It really is edge of your seat stuff, quite literally actually. That's Frozen, the 2010 film, for any of you still thinking I don't remember any scene like that with Elsa or Princess Anna. My final film recommendation this week is Elephant, the Gus Van Sant film. It's the closest sensory experience you can get to being in high school again. There is, I think. He puts you in the headspace of these kids through long takes, the use of sound. It's really extraordinary. It's as much an experience as it is a film. It affected me profoundly. That film is Elephant, and my final recommendation for this week. And that's all for now. Thanks for listening.